Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best of SEJ Summit webinar series. Today, we're going to be joined by Rhea Drysdale, a good friend of mine, known her forever. Super smart lady. She's the CEO at Outspoken Media, and she's going to talk about how to identify lost and missed content opportunities, which we were just recording a podcast today and talking all about how important content is today in SEO and marketing and business and everything. So I think this is going to be a really great session for everyone, and I hope that you're as excited as I am to learn. My name is Brent Satoris, in case you wonder who I mean by me, and I will be moderating today. And Rhea, if you can just give us a quick introduction about yourself. Afterwards, I'll jump into a little bit of housekeeping notes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brent, and excited to be here with SEJ Summit. So I am CEO of Outspoken, like you said, but I think I'm that person that, like the book E-Myth Revisited, I'm the SEO by trade who became a business owner because I liked what I did. And in my heart of hearts, I really am an analyst and a behaviorist, and that's what I love. And I think I've been able to find this incredible community upstate in New York here with just an awesome team of people, great clients, and we tackle really hard SEO content and reputation management problems for clients, and I love it.
Rhea, yeah. I think you might want to try. I think you're not sharing your screen yet, or we still have the webinar starting shortly screen is up. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right.
Perfect. All right.
And so what are you guys doing at Outspoken Media? You were mentioning earlier you've kind of launched some new products and some things there?
We did. So I think it's the first time that we're starting to kind of take a service and make it more of a bit of a productized version of the service. And so we've been doing competitive gap analyses for years as a way of just kind of baselining work for clients as we do a proposal. And we realized that it was just this really fun piece of work that became the foundation of an entire strategy, and also involved content audits, which we're going to be talking about today. And so both of those have kind of become individual services that clients can just sign up for, and we've got them kind of capped at a certain number of URLs, and we like getting through the grunt work. I think that I don't enjoy organizing or doing laundry at my house, but for some reason, I really like pouring through clients' messy websites. Oh, Brent, are you still there?
I muted myself. I apologize.
No.
So diving into a couple of housekeeping notes before we get into the presentation itself. If during the webinar at any time you have any questions, comments, concerns, things you want to ask about, there is a question box in your GoToWebinar control panel where you can type questions. Please go ahead and enter anything in there. We will have a Q&A at the end of this presentation, and I will reference back to all those questions to make sure that we get them asked to Rhea and she gets an opportunity to answer them. We'll do our best through the webinar to link any resources or any tools that are mentioned throughout the presentation. If we miss something, please ask for it and we'll make sure we get it to you. After the webinar, please stick around. We have a really short survey, literally like 5 minutes, and we review these surveys every single week. Every time we do the webinar, we're constantly looking to improve. So please take a moment to tell us where we can do better, where we're doing awesome, and we also will share all this feedback with Rhea as well. So please make sure you do the survey really quickly. Lastly, the entire webinar is being recorded and it will be made available through a post on Search Engine Journal. So without any further ado, let's dive into the webinar. Rhea, take us away.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. All right, hi guys. Again, my name is Rhea, and we're going to be talking about how to identify lost and missed content opportunities on your websites. So we talked briefly about what I do, which is a lot of SEO, but I thought it'd be fun to do a little emoji path of my life to this point. People like the little trivia piece that I studied primates back in school, strangely not in college, actually in middle school and high school, and thought that was going to become my life, and somehow ended up doing SEO instead. And I quickly realized that it was basically the same thing. I'm studying primates in their natural habitat, but on the internet. And that's really what I love most about SEO and content and reputation, is the study of people and how people consume information and search for it and communicate with each other. And I love that part of it. And there's this natural progression in there of doing a lot more strategy work. As Google evolved and search evolved, and how they were able to process information and content, it just became this natural kind of lead into doing more content strategy work. And I think we're finally at a point now where a lot of people that are in SEO maybe actually set out to become SEOs, but early on everyone just kind of found their way to it. Like Brent mentioned, I'm CEO at Outspoken Media. We are located in upstate New York outside of Albany, and we have some remote team members as well. We are a small agency that is growing, and we have an incredible team of people, including one who's not on our list yet. But this group I absolutely love working with, and a lot of the content and ideas that you'll see in this presentation come from everyone on the team working hard together, collaborating and sharing data and information and skills. And I always say we're kind of like a SWAT team. We get the hard jobs done. So what is lost content opportunity? Figured let's go ahead and just get started with exactly what the topic is. So this may seem obvious to some, but for others perhaps not. What is a lost content opportunity? It's what happens when your content used to perform well, but it no longer does. And in SEO, there's a lot of reasons that that could happen. And we know that that could be an algorithm update that occurred, something happened, you changed CMS, there was redesign, you changed domain names, or you didn't do anything at all, but your competitors just kind of slowly crept up on you, right? This is a website that we work with, and they have been very stagnant for a very long time. They used to be kind of top of the industry, and over time they didn't invest in any content. They had such a strong reputation that they decided to just kind of surf on it. And what has happened is that we have seen their amount of traffic just slowly kind of decline. So there's a lot of missed opportunity or lost opportunity in this case with this website that should be reclaimed. Differentiating a bit, what is the difference between a lost and a missed content opportunity? A missed content opportunity is something where your content has the potential to perform better than how it is performing today. And that may mean that you've never actually performed well for a certain keyword or section of your site, or different types of modifiers of keywords and queries, or you just haven't really had a presence for certain I'd say different types of intent or personas, or maybe even with rich snippets or things of that sort. This one is a little bit more curious because you can have a site that is performing very well, and we're using SpyFu in this case to look at a client's organic search efforts to see how they're performing. And in this case, I'm looking specifically at SpyFu's report on the quantity of ranking organic keywords. And we can see that it's increasing, which is good. We want it to increase. That looks pretty solid. And just for comparison's sake, I'm going to look at SEMrush. Same thing, increasing, interesting little kind of shelf there, and then a jump up. Everything looks pretty good, right? But when I take that same information and I put it into SpyFu's competitive analysis tool, I can see that our client, who is in red, is significantly below the keyword quantity of the industry's top performing company. Not only are they significantly below, but I'm very worried about that purple line. That is a company that previously owned, or the domain name was previously owned by a different company, and then it went dormant for a number of years, which you can see between 2013 and kind of the beginning of 16, and then it showed up on the scene. And they have grown significantly in the quantity of ranking organic keywords. And if we were to only focus on the performance of our client's site and their analytics and not look at the competitor data, we would miss the fact that we still have a long way to go to catch up with the leader. But not only that, we've got this creeper kind of sitting there getting ready to pounce, right? So when I think about these two different need states, it kind of clarifies as two different deliverable types. And if you're an agency, those two deliverables may be something that you're very comfortable with and deliver to clients. If you're an in-house team or a solo proprietor, you might have already kind of dabbled in this or explored it. The first is with lost content. We're typically doing a content audit where we pull a bunch of information down and analyze it. And then with missed content, we're typically performing a gap analysis or a competitive gap analysis. If it's just a gap analysis, we're kind of comparing you to yourself. And if it's competitive, we're comparing you to your competitors. What's important about both of those deliverables is that when we produce them, we started to realize that we got buy-in. And in SEO, that is everything. It's very, very difficult to get leadership to put money into SEO when it's so easy to put it into paid or other channels where it's just easier to track. And so we found that when we pulled at least the competitive gap data, especially during a business development kind of cycle with a proposal, it really gave real numbers and clarity to something that otherwise felt kind of ambiguous and confusing. And at that point, that potential really looked achievable. And we had a roadmap with our clients of where to go. That eventually led into being able to develop effective long-term strategies, which for us is great because we get nice relationships with clients that we can grow over time. It's also great for me as a business owner because I see my team really invested in the content and seeing that content perform and get results over time, which makes us happy. And we don't like showing up to work and not getting results. That's not why we started a company. So all of us want to be happy and get results for our clients. In addition to that, like I mentioned, you get this roadmap, and one of the things that a lot of our clients will ask is, can you just tell me what we need to do? And many times they're taking that list and tasking it out to internal resources or giving it to other vendors. We might be too expensive as an agency rate. I'm not saying that we're crazy expensive, but I absolutely get the fact that paying an agency to implement something when you have a writer down the street that you trust, that knows your brand well, it's just money, and we get it. It makes sense financially. So they're going to task out those very specific pieces of what needs to happen. And then there are other pieces that are probably going to come into play that are more technical or require consulting or ongoing strategy in other areas. But we're able to really break that out because we now have the data to support exactly what needs to happen and the level of priority and importance behind that. So what is a content audit? We touched on it briefly. BigCommerce has a nice little definition. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. Basically, a content audit is just the process of cataloging and analyzing all of the content that is on your website and really looking to include performance metrics. And those kind of performance metrics can be measured in many different ways, which we'll get into soon. I also really like Everett Sizemore's piece on Moz. He has a just fantastic piece that the bit.ly URL goes to where he talks through the process of a content audit, and I would urge you to check that out if you want just a really nice kind of walkthrough. But he breaks out content audit's purpose for SEOs as really the purpose is to improve the perceived trust and quality of a domain while optimizing for crawl budget and the flow of PageRank and other ranking signals throughout the site. This is especially important when you have larger sites and enterprise sites where these kind of fixes can really have a major impact. Not to say that it's not huge for smaller sites, absolutely, but in those cases you may still need to accrue a lot more domain authority, may need to get more citations, and yes, still even backlinks in today's world. But if you are bleeding out with lots of low quality content or content that shouldn't be in the index or other things, that can really affect performance and your ability to compete. So what is a competitive gap analysis? We touched on this a bit. I quote myself here. I couldn't find great definitions for it, but really competitive gap analysis just compares your performance to a defined competitor set and your performance metrics that you want to measure there. And that competitor set is kind of interesting because how you think about your competitors really varies. I've had clients say, we have one direct competitor, we only care about them, nobody else. And other clients say, we have no direct competitors, there's no one like us. Usually it's kind of something in the middle. Sometimes we've got clients that have literally dozens of competitors, and they range from international companies down to local independent providers, depending on what the service or the company is. And what's interesting about competitors is you might be competing against yourself. The top competitor might be your own product listings on Amazon or other shopping sites. Or you might have paid ads that you're competing with, and you're bidding on keywords that you have the potential to own with organic search. Or you're competing with Google, who is introducing more and more features to search results that are pushing folks out of organic. So there's a lot of ways to look at competitors. One of my favorite really comes down to informational competitors, folks that are sitting pretty for kind of blended search results that are both transactional and informational in nature. And how do we claim things like answer boxes? So let's go ahead and dive into content audits. I think in the description for this session, I mentioned digital dust. So forgotten content collects digital dust. And I just thought that it's a good way of thinking about it, right? In our house, there's always that little piece of the corner somewhere where there's a tiny spider web or a little bit of dust. It drives me crazy, and I can never seem to just make the house totally clean. And I think websites are like that as well. Most of us have been in the industry at this point long enough that we've seen content that we've created get published and broken. Links kind of over time. Let's go ahead and get into everything that happens, right? Traffic declines. Why does traffic decline? It declines because we've stopped promoting content. It's old, it's outdated, or perhaps there are no longer investments in social sharing, or there's a lot fewer referral visits that are coming into your site. There may be an algorithmic update that happened from Google, and there potentially might be a manual action that actually causes some significant concern on your site if someone from the webmaster team were to inform you that you had done something that violated a webmaster guideline. You might also just simply have content that was fresh and timely at a certain point and no longer is, so it's not relevant or meeting the intent of the user. You also will probably see a lot more increased competition. We're at a point now where there's just so many folks that are online, and everyone's kind of upped their game or had time to innovate and produce better websites and stronger content, and that makes it harder to compete for the same terms that you may be held onto for a very long time. In addition to that, those search result pages change frequently. I love it. Every day we've got a Slack channel where anything fun we find, we drop into the SERP screenshots, and we just keep track of these crazy, fun, weird things that Google's doing. Sometimes very concerning things, like potentially taking your content and putting it in search results. In addition to that, there's lots of technical changes. If you have a CMS switch, or just everything that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong at some point with a client involving their website. IT decides to flip the switch on HTTPS with no notification and no planning. And in one client's case, there was a CMS that had no find and replace functionality. So when that happened, there was no way to update the URLs of a large enterprise site except going manually, one at a time. So anything can happen on the technology side. You could be hacked, you could get malware, servers can go down, etc. And you might have a site that simply hasn't been able to release edits as quickly as the industry is innovating. So you might not be mobile friendly, but we know we now live in a mobile first world, and your site might not be secure, and really should be. So those traffic declines happen for a number of reasons, and like I mentioned, there are a lot of issues that happen on the technical side that just contribute to technical debt. Sometimes that debt doesn't necessarily result in traffic declines, it just kind of adds up to a poor user experience, or it may cause Google to stop crawling your site as frequently, or something that used to appear on the page no longer appears, and as a result, your images don't display and you're losing answer boxes or image search results or other things. Probably the biggest thing that often happens is server errors and redirects, and this can happen internally. It can happen with links pointing outbound, and then definitely inbound links as well. We touched on a couple of these other guys as well. Redesigns are a big one. Whenever you update forms or other fields and things. URL and domain changes are a big one. Outdated authorship is interesting because I think that there are little things that can happen when you change the author of content and if they still have access or other things like that. Also, there are moments when you have certain files that used to be supported or published and someone decides that those PDFs don't need to be there and they get taken down or overwritten and they're no longer supported potentially, like Swift. And then a long time ago, I feel like at WordPress sites, when people tweeted, we would take the tweet, right, and embed it, and that still happens today. And I just never understood, why would we embed this little piece of code and risk the fact that at any point something could happen to jeopardize that? And sure enough, we've had a lot of sites where old tweets no longer appear in the content, and even if we try to access them, the URLs have changed, there's no way of getting it back, and that content has lost all context at this point. This is one of my favorite examples. This is our website, and Zane, who's our technology manager, discovered that we were linking out to a site that had previously been a high quality site, and then it was acquired, or it basically died, and the registration ended. And someone picked it up cheaply and turned it into a pornographic site. So now Outspoken Media was linking to a pornographic site in the year 2018. So that was very sad. Other things that can happen, off-message content, right? This happens very, very often in a lot of our clients' organizations where someone used to offer a particular product or service and no longer does, but that content is still online, and there's been turnover internally. People don't even know necessarily what's live on the site or who owns it. There's also new brand language and messaging that comes frequently. Definitely lots of updates to fonts, colors, design elements, brand and legal guidelines. And the more concerning side, I think, is if you're in a highly regulated industry and you have certain compliance requirements or things of that sort that really do need to be updated frequently. This can be a major problem, not just for those users, but also for SEO. And this is a big problem because in many cases, sites like the one that I mentioned that have more compliance and regulatory restrictions are what's called your money or your life site. And some of you are going to be very familiar with this, others may not. This is basically pages that could potentially impact the future happiness, health, financial means, and safety of users. And this is something that Google coined in terms of the terminology, and it comes out of Google's quality rater guidelines. And I remember that a long time ago, the first time I got the Google quality rater guidelines was in an email, and it was so exciting because a friend had sent it to me, and it was very hush-hush, like, we got the quality rater guidelines. Don't tell anyone, right? This is top secret. They got leaked, and we're not supposed to let anyone know. And now they're published online, and we see that they exist. And for those who aren't aware, Google, in addition to the algorithm and everyone who works on that and tries to protect users with web span team and all these other parts of Google, there's also this part that is basically a large quantity of contractors who assess the quality of pages that they identify and find online. And this is kind of a form of insurance to say, you know, is the algorithm picking up on what it needs to, and what is the quality of these pages? Do we trust them? Are there any concerns there? And these quality rater guidelines are updated frequently and then delivered as training materials to those quality raters. And they always contain really interesting information that as SEOs we can take and apply to what we do. A quality rater is looking at the purpose of the page, the expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of that content. And that's, you've potentially heard a lot of people talk about EAT. And also the quality and amount of main content that is visible on the page, as well as the amount of website information or information about who's responsible for that. And then my favorite, because I do a lot of reputation management and it feels like the year of reputation, Google also cares incredibly about the reputation of who's responsible for that main content or the reputation of the website itself. And we can talk about that for hours, but let's keep going. Google considers high-quality pages to have a very high level of EAT, so expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. They also have to have a satisfying amount of high or highest quality main content. And they have to have a positive reputation for the website or the creator of that main content. What's interesting to me, though, is what they deem to be a low-quality rating. And this is very, very important for those YMYL sites, Your Money or Your Life. Those sites would be folks who are banks, health sites, anything where someone's logging in and putting money into it, legal sites, lawyers, folks who really do affect the well-being of the users who engage with that content. And those sites are held to the absolute highest quality. And if there are any concerns about the following characteristics, they are not going to receive a high quality rating because they're held to such a high standard, which means that if you are the creator of that content, it is absolutely vital that you keep up with that content. So on the low quality pages, what Google says is that these should be rated low or lowest if there is an inadequate level of EAT, if the quality of the main content is low, if there's an unsatisfying amount of main content for the purpose of that page, if the title of the main content is exaggerated or shocking, as well as a few other things. But those three that I've highlighted are the ones that I care about most, because this feels like a checklist of what you see in every content marketing article on the web. Write a great clickbait article that's going to engage the user and get them to come into your content. It's wonderful for click-through rates. Make sure that you've got content that fits all need states. Content marketing is not telling you to have low quality content, but for a while there, people were definitely churning out content to just hit particular keywords or natural language phrases and other things, and it was working until very recently. So there's a lot more that's kind of going on behind the scenes with Google in addition to all of this. There's also predicting site quality patent that was granted in 2017. That Bill, of course, picked up on as the expert in all things Google patents affecting SEO and search. And this is an interesting patent because basically Google has figured out how to generate a phrase model for a group of sites. That model is then used to create a baseline site quality score, and any new site that pops up that should belong to that plurality of sites can then be rated against that baseline according to the phrase model of that content, which is generated using n-grams. And it's important to note that the inventor of this patent, besides Yoon, is Nabit Panda, and Panda might sound familiar. This is the inventor who was behind the Panda algorithm update that occurred. So I would take this very, very seriously and really think about it. There's a link here to learn a little bit more about n-grams. We're not going to get into statistical analysis, but I'll say that when you're thinking about n-grams, it can happen on a word level or phrases, and it really comes down to thinking about the content and how it kind of plays out. I don't want to get to this level of trying to map out n-grams in content by any means, but as an SEO, there are certain best practices that are ingrained in us, which I think just come down to what is going to be helpful to the user, what words are they looking for, and how do we kind of co-locate those. All of this, while interesting, is not going to tell us that our content needs work. And I think that's important because for the most part, we know when we're doing a good job or not. And a lot of us probably have parts of our homes that look like Monica's closet on Friends that we are hiding desperately from all visitors who come to our house. And online, we end up having something very similar. It may not be an actual closet, but it's definitely a resource section or kind of a forgotten service area, or a section of products that are no longer available, or definitely blogs. Blogs feel like the place that content goes to die after a while, right? And we know that these are terrifying, but we don't have the time to put attention to them. I want to just let you know right now that that's okay. Bad content happens to good marketers, not just good, great marketers. Bad content happens to all of us, and there's nothing wrong with you. Literally all of us are dealing with the exact same problem. And I'm going to give an example of a client that we love, and we absolutely love their content strategy, their site, their brand. We enjoy working with them, but all of us recognize this problem that exists on their site due to an aggressive editorial calendar that kind of unintentionally made the site look like they were spinning content, which is not the case, but they're just trying to write to particular need states and really fulfill goals across other teams. Because when you create content, it's not just for SEO, right? We have to use it for other channels, and that's what they were doing. But what they ended up doing here was having content like the top 10 reasons to buy a plant. Now, I can tell you they don't sell plants, but I've withheld what they actually do to protect the identities here. So top 10 reasons to buy a plant, the benefits of buying a plant, how to buy a plant, why you should buy a plant, the advantages of buying a plant, the pros and cons of buying a plant, 3 signs you should buy a plant, buying a plant in 2018, buying a plant in 2019, purchasing a plant for your home, purchasing a plant for your house, and of course the ultimate guide to buying a plant, which was about 4 to 5 paragraphs. And I have never seen an ultimate guide that is only 4 to 5 paragraphs. So this is concerning for a number of reasons. We all know it's concerning because none of us are going to read all of those articles and expect to get something different. But in addition to this, Google actually has a guideline for content quality, which speaks to the fact that if there are different pages with similar content, then they see these as duplicate versions of the same page, and they're going to choose only one version of that URL as the canonical, and then the others are going to actually be crawled less and considered dupes. That becomes a problem because now your content is underperforming. You have more of it. You're not having Google crawl all of that content. It's not working for you. And if you've already used it for whatever the purpose was that you created it, and it's no longer helping with SEO, then what is it doing? It's certainly not benefiting anything. So I just want to reiterate that, again, bad content can happen to good marketers, and there are many, many legitimate reasons that poor quality can exist on the site. It can be because of email campaigns, and you just need to be able to hit a calendar every week and have something to send, or social calendars that you need to fill. If you have a lot of sales enablement content that needs to be supported on your website, or demand gen campaigns running, or you've got personalized experiences that need to pair content with an audience or kind of groups that you've defined. These are all absolutely great marketing tactics, and I'm not telling you to not do them, but here's what I'm proposing. If the teams that need that content haven't touched that content in a while, I'd say maybe 6 months, I want it. And when I say I want it, I mean as an SEO. Give it to me, let it be mine or yours. You can definitely make it yours. And then we're going to take it and turn it into phenomenal SEO results and change how organizations perceive content. So in this case, I would take all of that content that we just listed, smash it together into the ultimate guide to buying a plant. And when I say smash it together, we would think very, very strategically about how that content is placed and how we don't repeat the same content over and over. But we do hit those keywords, because if they exist as keywords in data and in questions that people are asking, then we want to make sure we meet that user intent organically. But we're not going to just rephrase it over and over. We're going to add value, and we're going to make the page skimmable and engaging and well-designed. And then we'll have subtopics that we link off to from that, where if someone needs to buy a plant for their house, or maybe their office, or for a girlfriend, then we'll think about having separate content around those subject matters. But we're going to do it in a very methodical way once we have this larger form guide. Here's an example with a client that we worked with where we noticed they didn't have that many resources. So we were able to do a very manual content audit where we just literally clicked through the resources. I think there were 4 pages, and most of the content was seriously like a paragraph, and then it linked to a news mention on another website. So it wasn't performing. There was hardly any search traffic coming in. Analytics looked terrible. It wasn't getting promoted in any way, but there was one article that had a little bit of traffic to it. It was part one of what was the exact same article, but split into two parts for some unknown reason. So it was how to do blank part one, and then the next title was literally how to do blank part two. Well, Google's going to look at that and decide which one it cares about. And over 17 months, these two pieces combined had only gotten 67 organic sessions to them. And one of them is clearly the winner, but even that is a small amount of content given the potential of the keyword traffic that we saw from the impression data that was in Search Console. So we took those two pieces, we merged them into one piece, which in this case was literally taking the content, putting it together on one page, and then we fleshed out the content a bit more, and the team created custom illustrations, a nice header, and within 3 months we're up to 81 sessions. Not a ton of traffic if you're dealing with big numbers, but for this client it was really good. You know, it's the top performing resource by far in just 3 months versus you know, more than a year. This is what that data looks like in Google Analytics when we look at those organic sessions. And again, we're dealing with very small numbers, so I'm not going to cheer over 2,800%, but I know that it will keep growing because we were able to target more than just what the original content had been. So in that case, it was both optimizing for missed opportunity as well as some new opportunity or lost opportunities too. If you want to nerd out, there are a couple topics that we're not going to be able to get into just for the sake of time, and so I'd urge you to check out pillar cluster models. HubSpot has some really cool testing that they did around this, and it's fully written up across a number of different posts. And then content pruning. I think Bill Sebald and I think also Everett Sizemore had some good content out there about content pruning as well. And for the gardeners of the world, yes, it's just like pruning a plant. You're going to cut off all the things that don't need to be there and expect that the rest will grow and flourish. And I'm not really advocating for content pruning as a tactic. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I am saying that we're not here to just cut off content. What I'm advocating for is that there's a very strategic approach to how you prioritize your content, update it, refresh it, merge it, etc. And in order to do that, where do you start? Some of you may be familiar with Marie Kondo. She invented the KonMari method, which if you read her book, because you're a weirdo who likes to read about organizing and cleaning your house, she wrote this phenomenal book about the Japanese art of decluttering and organizing your home. And she's got some great videos online if you kind of want a Cliff Notes version. But clearly it was popular, 6 million copies sold.
If it doesn't make you happy, right? If it doesn't make you happy, I love her stuff.
Absolutely, exactly, right? So her whole thing is, it's not just a framework for how to, or sorry, I wanted to clarify that in her case, it's not just about organizing. It's, in my mind, an entire framework for how you make difficult decisions. Yes, you're organizing your sock drawer, but Brent, like he just said, if it's about evaluating things that bring happiness to your life, then that is much more than your socks. And I like it because she helps bring a framework to something that feels very heavy and irrational. And there's this whole process where she has to get everything of similar categories together, and you just take it all and dump it on your bed or on the floor. In this case, she's going through kind of sentimental things, which is further along in the list. You start with the things that aren't emotional first, and you get all those together, and then you hold on to each one and see if it sparks joy. And what I found interesting when we started going through our site on Outspoken Media is that for me, holy, like, I can't curse here, but wow, that was really emotional and heavy, because I've been with this company for 9 years. We've had 2 partner buyouts. I've had 2 kids. We've changed services and teams. And that content just represents so much just emotion and heaviness over time. But in addition to that, there's just so much of it, right? Like there's 1,000 blog posts on Outspoken Media alone. And if you get into client sites where you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of pages, where do you start? And what I just want to clarify here is that, you know, there's a lot of reasons to not update your content. You're probably very familiar with them, but to be clear, if you want to start this process and you have multiple stakeholders, you're going to have to communicate with them. That can be sticky. You got to find people who are willing to listen, come to the table, collaborate, and kind of engage around the same thing. There may be technical limitations to what you're trying to accomplish, or a lack of resources and funding. That's the fundamental part of it, absolutely. There may be some misaligned expectations about what's happening and why it's happening. And for a lot of you, you may just not know where to start or really what you're doing at all. And if you start trying to just chop off certain sections or merge them with SEO, you can really cause some serious damage. And you might be in an organization where just you don't know who owns this piece of content. In big companies and startups, that's especially true. And the last point here is just this kind of apathetic opinion. You know, is it really hurting us if we don't do this? My argument is that yes, it absolutely is. So how do you perform that content audit? In a nutshell, you have to start planning and really think through it. Do you have to look at the entire website, or are you just looking at a section or a folder or anything around a certain subject matter? And once you kind of define that, you can determine the best route and the best tools that you need and how to crawl the site. And crawling can be very expensive depending on the size of the site, or something as simple as just advanced search operators in Google. From there, you have to take your data out. Typically, sometimes you might be able to make a manual list, or you already have a list or a spreadsheet that you're working off of. Other times you have to get the data out of whatever the crawler is, and then you're typically merging metrics, and in those cases you're having to do some spreadsheet work in Excel or Google Sheets and combine APIs or things, or do a lot of VLOOKUP. So there's some technical work required there on the data side. At that point, there's a lot of manual lift when you need to kind of filter, analyze, tag, and make decisions about your content. And you can get absolutely stuck in every one of those areas. And hopefully you come out of it and then get to the point where it becomes very fun, because now you've seen all of the data and you can just start writing everything up. But it's a long process, or can feel that way if it's the first time you've done it. And none of it matters until you actually start executing on all of that work. So I think in this case, it's important to kind of be aware of your organization and what the expectations of your organization or your personal style are. You might be in an organization where everything functions in a kind of a waterfall project management way, and you have to have all of this research done before you even get buy-in and are able to start on the project, and then it's going to be months before you ever see a return. And in other cases, you might be in a very lean or an agile kind of Scrum type environment, and you can do some quick tactical work, demonstrate that win, and move on to other things. So getting into the content audit side, free tools that exist, like I mentioned, those advanced search operators. You can just go to Google, type in site : in your domain name. You can filter and refine by different folders or simply by different topics. And there are a lot more search operators that you can use for things like Untitled and other things of that sort. Free tools that might exist that would be helpful, I would say Search Console and Bing, absolutely. You're going to see the content that they have that you're getting traffic for. It's not going to make up for a crawler that can see absolutely everything on your site. But you'll see what's performing, which if you were to kind of compare to another crawler will give you an indication of the difference between what they have and what a crawler is able to discover. You can also go old school and get Xenu links with Sleuth, which is for a PC. I'm on a Mac, so I haven't actually said the word sleuth in a very long time. And you also have a lot of professional crawlers that are out there. Screaming Frog is what we use internally. We also have a deep crawl account for much larger sites when we need it. Moz has a crawler, Sitebulb. There are a few others out there. As of, I think, this morning, Screaming Frog just released version 10, and now they have some cool visualization work with mapping, like a crawler map that's very similar to kind of that fun feature that Sitebulb had. So check that out. Once you have your crawl performed, and there's a whole world of information you have to know about how to crawl, but I would urge you in that case to probably go check out Everett's piece, which gets into a lot more detail. At that point, you have to take the data, extract it, and probably start playing with some APIs or other data sources, or if you're just doing it manually, that's fine too. Just start pairing the data up with the pages that you have. I like pulling together Google Analytics, Search Console, and dropping all of that into Data Studio. We also use Content King, which is kind of a newer tool. I love Content King. It keeps us updated on every major change that happens within minutes on our websites and our client sites. And we're able to just see kind of a documented history of everything that changed from robots.txt files to other types of assets, and they do pull in other types of data too. They have not paid me to say all of this. I'm just really excited about the tool. URL Profiler is another good tool that aggregates a lot of APIs, pulls them all together into one source, and then all of that information is matched with the URL, and it cuts out a lot of the legwork that you would otherwise have to do by matching and pairing this content and those URLs. And one of the most frustrating parts of doing this kind of data extraction, transformation type process is that you have to match and clean those URLs, and every tool will export them a little bit differently. So GA versus Search Console, you're going to get a different URL. Once you have that data extracted, you want to take it and be able to visualize it. And when you can visualize it and play with it, you're going to get way more insights out of it. So again, I like Data Studio for this. Tableau is another option, more expensive, and I just didn't really like having it on my laptop because I felt like my laptop was going to get set on fire. And then Power BI, which I know Will Reynolds has done a ton of work on Power BI, and a couple of our clients are really starting to dabble in it too, based on the fact that they just, that's what they are going to use because of their environments. It doesn't matter what you use as long as you're familiar with it and are able to connect and get your data in there and feel good about that data. So there's probably some testing involved in, do I trust this? Am I really getting full data? How important is it to have exact numbers versus sampled numbers? And there are some cases where trying to get all of that into a particular tool is going to be very, very difficult to do. So when your content is too big, you may need to have a database set up or create an entire data warehouse. Google BigQuery is something we've played with a bit. Other clients are starting to do the same thing there. And I know that Mike King wrote a really nice piece about how to run Screaming Frog and URL Profiler on Amazon Web Services. All right, guys, we're doing okay. I know we're getting short on time, so I'm going to plow through a little bit more. There are some limitations when you get into these tools, and it is so frustrating, right? So Excel has a limit of about 1 million rows across 16,000 columns, which sounds like a lot until you start dealing with big sites. And the limitation here is typically not going to be from the row count, it's going to be from your machine, which again is going to feel like if you're on a Mac, it's about to get set on fire on your legs and burn a hole through the floor. Or just slow down and shut down. And with Google Sheets, it's at 2 million cells, and I've spent entirely too many hours of my life waiting for something to upload just to have them tell me that I couldn't actually get it in there. So definitely check out all these resources if you're dealing with big amounts of data. In addition to those kind of technical limitations, when you start to get into content audit, there are some skill set limitations where you have to kind of know how to work with that data. And if you're in Excel, it would be knowing little functions like how to determine the length, the character length of a particular cell, like a page title or meta description, or count if, substitute, got the VLOOKUP versus index match crowds. Filtering is always surprising to me how many folks walk into an interview, maybe here at Outspoken, and just have never used the filter tool or how to use text to columns. And these are just like basic default things that we have to know how to use in Excel when dealing with large amounts of content. Pivot tables are also just critical. And I was so scared of pivot tables until the first time I did one. And then it just became like a playground of data. And very recently, somehow I didn't discover this for more than a decade, there's something called an insert slicer where you can take a pivot table, generate that, and then you can insert your slicer and add another field on top of that that says, hey, not only do I want to see all of my competitors' top performing content in descending order by most amount of traffic for this keyword bucket, but I only want to see it for those keywords that are ranking on page 1. And when you can get into that kind of granular level of data, it's much more meaningful than trying to wade through it in kind of a larger view. And it really cuts down on the manual work too. Google Data Studio, just because we play with it a lot, the parts of that we've really enjoyed are the ability to recently blend data. So you can take data finally from 2 different sources and push them together. And calculated fields within Google Data Studio, where you can bring in all of the kind of metrics that you want, and then you can generate your own labels, which if you're in Google Analytics by itself, there's a limit on the amount of content groups you can have, but you're not limited in Google Data Studio that I've seen yet. And so we've been able to do all of our content grouping in Data Studio much more efficiently now, and we can label that content, and we can also shorten URLs and clean them up and make the report very easy to kind of digest. The last thing here is regex. There's a lot that you need regex for, just to filter URLs, and with the Google Data Studio, the Google Search Console API going into Data Studio, you get all of your keyword data where you don't get it out of Google Search Console itself, but if you're in Data Studio, you do, and that's really cool because now with regex, I can kind of mash that up and play with it a lot more. From here, it just kind of comes down to technical literacy. There's a lot that you kind of have to know in terms of status codes, errors, understanding HTML and structured markup, and also if you're getting into crawling your site, do you have anything on the technical side that's going to make that crawl incomplete because of kind of render blocking, JavaScript, or anything else that's blocked. And those are going to be really important just in kind of diagnosing crawler problems. If you're not as technical, maybe there's someone in your organization who is and can kind of help with that setup. And there's also a lot of tutorials for each tool online that just kind of walk you through it, and some really smart folks who've written about it so far. From here, you're just going to merge your data, you're going to filter it, and you're going to tag it. And that probably sounds really big and overwhelming because it is. So I'm not going to go into all of it, because what I think matters here is what matters to you. I can list out a whole bunch of metrics, and I did right here, but I'm not going to read all of them, because what matters is whether you're engagement focused or conversion focused, or there's just something else going on that you really care about and need to know about. Maybe there's something on the usability side, or I don't know, it's just always interesting how clients think about their content and what matters to them. And that's going to be the data that you need to pull down. And there might be other cool things that you can include, but it really can start to feel like a black hole if you're just pulling data from every which way just because you can. It doesn't mean that it's going to help you get to a point of what you need to do, which is acting on that any sooner. So again, tons of metrics. We'll share the deck afterwards. Feel free to take a look at it. This is a small amount of what you could possibly put into a content audit. So again, it just comes down to what your needs are and how you want to think about that content. And when you finally emerge, I say weeks later, when we started this process, it took us weeks and weeks to get through it. Now we can get through it in a couple of days, depending on the size of the site. And a lot of other folks out there have kind of figured out how to streamline, put reports together. But when you emerge, the hard work really comes into play, but I think it's the most exciting part, which is just making decisions. And usually we think about it as you can keep your content exactly as it is, you can update it, you can kill it, or you can redirect it. But there are other options in there for the SEOs of the group. We know that we can also just put a canonical on it if it's similar but should still exist for some reason. We can simply no index it if it just shouldn't be available in search, but we still kind of need it. We may need to disallow it, but first no index and remove it. And in other cases, we may want to do my favorite part here, which is consolidate and redirect. So here's an example where a client, a large brand, we've been investing in their content on their blog for years. And we were kind of at a point of realizing that we had these 3 posts that were very similar in topic, and we had a new goal for the year, which was to really hit a very specific, aggressive kind of number of leads organically for this client. And so we said, well, why are we producing so much content for this blog on this subdomain that doesn't even have the ability to convert a lead on it? Why don't we take that content, put it on the main site, make it more resourceful, and we had more capabilities within that CMS to make it engaging. So we took these 3 pieces, which over 26 months had gotten less than 10,000 sessions. We restructured it, totally redesigned it, borrowed as much of the content as we could, defended the keywords that were performing so we didn't lose performance on those, 301'd everything over, and in 7 months we're at more than 31,000 organic sessions, which is, right, 3 times more than before. I'm good at math. This is that kind of chart. With Data Studio, you can take your charts and layer them on top of each other with a transparent background. Super cool. And it allows you to see your changes happening almost in real time. And I love it. Every day I hop in and just like refresh it. And this is a seasonal piece, so we know that that dip is happening right now and we're not worried about it at all. From here, there's the competitive gap analysis, and we're not going to go into the same level of detail on this one, but there are some tools out there that can help you expedite this: SEMrush, SpyFu, Authority Labs. And the only thing that I would add to those metrics that you can track, it's exactly like a content audit when you go through the gap analysis, but you're also now tracking a kind of column within your spreadsheet that is client versus competitor. I'm not showing you the spreadsheet because there's nothing really to show. It's a giant spreadsheet that has URLs and whatever metrics you want. I learned a long time ago, don't make your spreadsheet pretty, because if you do and you drop conditional formatting on that thing, if I'm your boss, I'm going to yell at you because you just made it an incredibly slow process and it's going to load terribly. And if it's just me that did it on accident in that moment, I'm going to curse myself because it's going to take forever to load. This is another client where we discovered through competitive analysis that their competitor, who is, make sure I get this right, competitor is green, the client is blue. This is search volume data for their top performing keywords across 7, I believe, different pages, 6 or 7. And the client was only outperforming them across 2 of these pages, which was shocking because they're significantly larger as an organization. And this competitor is also very small. When we looked at their actual larger national competitors, I couldn't even put them on this chart because you wouldn't see them on it. So we took a look at what was going on, and I noticed that on the content side, the competitor had a lot more content that was hitting a lot more keywords across more categories with more subcategories. And in addition to that, they had persona content that was targeting different kind of modifiers off of these core terms. And our client just didn't have any of this content at all. When I really dug in, I found they had some of the content, but if I were to tell you how many internal links were pointing to these absolutely major pages for their site, how many do you think it would be? There's no interaction here, so I'm going to hope that you said more than 7. These are the most important pages of this client's website, and they had 7 internal links across all 5 pages pointing to them. That was it. By comparison, their privacy policy and about 20 empty job pages alone had over 3,800 internal links pointing to them. So we were able, with the competitive gap analysis, to identify a massive, informational architecture problem that helped inform a redesign and navigation changes that occurred. And it was exciting to see. There was kind of a 2-stage rollout on the launch recently. And you know, it was really exciting to kind of not have the I told you so moment, but a little bit. They were worried. They're like, you think we're going to get results? Yeah, we got results. We're happy. I'd like to be able to cheer that on and say we're done, but the truth is we're never done, because the moment we win at something, our competitors are going to up their game and take notice, and we need to make sure that we're always conscious of that. And I recommend typically doing this work quarterly or at least annually. But even when we do it annually, we've seen competitors show up really fast. And I had one client say, why didn't we see this? And I said, because we weren't looking at it, you know, we were staring off in a different direction. So just to recap here, what are the benefits of updating and consolidating your content? Definitely increased website quality and improved user experience. You're able to increase your crawling and indexation. increase your search visibility by claiming more rankings, rich snippets, answer boxes, and things of that sort, get more traffic, more conversions, and all of that leads to basically growing your brand online. But my favorite part is the bonus side of it, which is that you're able to save money because you're not having to come up with new topics and outsource that. You're just kind of improving what already exists. Don't get me wrong, it still takes time and money to do that, but hopefully a little less than something brand new. You're also saving time, and you're saving brain cells, because it really hurts editorial teams and SEOs and other folks when you have to regurgitate the same thing and come up with new ways to phrase it over and over and then solve for the problem that that's causing by eroding the quality of your site. But best of all is time to innovate. When all you're doing is trying to make the existing content better and better and better, it means that you've kind of broken out of a 2-column piece of content into something that allows you to create really beautiful components. This is over on Brain Traffic. Christina Halverson, this is a section where I hadn't visited her site in a while, and I noticed that she has these really beautiful little components with information in them, and they're just fun. And for a smaller site, I thought, wow, she took the time to create something just so beautiful and effective. And Outspoken Media, we just went through this process of totally rewriting and rebuilding the website. The design isn't totally there yet. The content's definitely not there yet. But now we have the ability to do cool header components and things like this. And on Nest, they had this really great little feature. So if anyone from Nest or anyone who works with Nest is on the phone, I love this little area where they're comparing 2 products with a little bit of information about it. And it's a fun component where when you scroll down in this transactional page, there's then a call to action to see what works with Nest. And it was cool to hop over there and see that that exact same component is now being used here, but with modifier keywords. So they've taken the same component, recycled it, applied it with Nest plus Whirlpool, and then they do the same thing with every type of appliance with a little bit of content. Google has some amazing documentation and really resourceful info. And the last thing I'll leave you with here is they've got this cool area where if you want to ask questions, they're listed out in this list. It's not an accordion, it's not an expanded list. It's just written out. It's easy to read. It's natural language, optimized anchor text, and it's almost like Google knows how to do good SEO. So that is everything from me.
Awesome. Great presentation. I don't think people appreciate how in-depth that truly was and how complete it truly was. And it's a lot of work, but I think that, you know, just to kind of validate a little bit from around the space, I talk with a lot of huge publishers, you know, 30, 40 million, you know, views a month type publishers, and everybody that's in the know right now is doing this and seeing massive success, especially from the repurposing content. At Search Engine Journal, we started doing this about 1.5 years ago, and we're also seeing a huge increase on every piece of content that we do this with. So this truly is one of the best things that you can do with content right now. So really appreciate that information. Want to just kind of plug real quick that we have another webinar that's going to be coming up October 3rd that I highly suggest you register for. Nicole DeLeon from North Star Inbound has done a couple different webinars on link building, and all of them have been super good. So highly suggest that. Again, that's going to be October 3rd, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Again, Rhea, absolutely appreciate the information. Great presentation. This will be in a recap post. And thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.
Cheers.